Greetings, my dear viewers. It is I, Drahjan, and welcome back to an update on my Magic the Gathering to Dungeons & Dragons creature conversion homebrew rulings. I do apologize for the lack of videos these past couple of weeks. My brain's been in some form of fog. No motivation, no inspiration. I barely have the motivation to get up in the morning on some days. It's a mess. But I hope you can forgive me, and I thought I would try to get things back on track with today's video by giving you somewhat of an update to the conversion document that I am preparing for the rules on how to convert a Magic the Gathering monster into Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. There are a couple of updates that I have, mostly on the creatures themselves, but also on some abilities that some of these creatures might have. Not all of the ones that I covered in that video, but some of them. So let's go ahead and get into the update and see what I have prepared for you today. If you have not seen the first video in this series, I would recommend you check that out first. Technically, it is the sequel of my raw guide to Homebrewery, where I cover creating monsters in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition using the rules as they are written. But enough chitter-chatter, let's go ahead and get into the update. And first thing I wanted to go over was the initial CR that we had talked about in the last video. I did not really change too much about this, but I wanted to cover this little table again, just so we have a clear idea of what I am going to be talking about here in a second. And that is going to be the some math that I had here. Using the converted mana cost plus our card rarity, we know that the highest that we have as far as initial CR is 25 if we go based off of the converted mana cost of 15 on Imrakul the Eon's Torn. Now, this probably needs to be updated at some point because one of our more recent sets from the Dungeons & Dragons Magic the Gathering crossover did give us the Tarask and Tiamat respectively, and using this calculation, they are given an initial CR of 18 for the Tarask and 17 for Tiamat, even though they are both a CR of 30. So there's definitely some updates to this calculation that might need to be made in the future, but I wanted to bring this up because it is important for the first change that I made. And that is to the initial CR of token creatures. I was having a bit of a dilemma with how the token creatures were getting their initial CR, since I have any token creature of power 2 or greater using the converted mana cost and card rarity of the card or ability that summoned it. Or if it was summoned by a planeswalker, using the loyalty counter cost of the ability that the planeswalker used to summon that creature. The examples that I have are the Dragon Master Outcast and the Enchantment Dragon Roost, who are both summoning a 5/5 dragon token, but because of the rarity bonuses that these two are getting, the challenge rating does shift a little bit. Now, you could very well change the CR bonus to fit the Drahjan token itself, in which case it'll be the same for each of the abilities, but using the exact CR bonus that is given to the Dragon Master Outcast would entail a slightly lesser challenge rating for this token. So you probably could just do a similar CR to the rarity that the ability or card has. So that's probably what I would recommend. This would mean that the Drahjan token for both of these cards would still be an initial CR of 11. And that is the CR that you would use for most calculations that require a CR. Now to our main change here, and that is to the calculations made for toughness. For hit dice specifically, I decided that we needed the rarity bonus to be added to the calculation of the hit dice. And this is actually proven to give us what we need for similar stats to what we already have in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Our example here is a Dragon token of toughness 6. This will give us 14 D12 hit dice. And with the additional hit points being 100, we are getting stats that are indeed similar to an adult brass dragon, who has hit points of 15 D12 plus 75. So the addition of the rarity bonus, or rather 2 times the rarity bonus of the card summoning this token, this will apply no matter the rarity of the token. It will actually improve upon the defensive CR calculations that we will need to find out the final CR later on. And speaking of toughness, we do need to talk about the static power increase, static power decrease, as well as the temporary power and toughness increases and decreases. And I ended up settling with a set stat increase. For a static power and toughness increase or decrease, it is just going to be a set number. If it is a +1, it'll be +1 for the static increase or decrease. As we have seen here, this affected creature receives a bonus to the damage roll of any one attack that creature uses on each of its turns, equal to the static power increase or the static power decrease. For your toughness, it is going to be a bonus or a penalty to the Constitution score, equal to the static toughness increase, as well as having the armor class would increase and decrease as appropriately to a maximum of 25 and a minimum of 10. For the temporary, I took inspiration from the Rogue's Sneak Attack and the Paladin's Smite. For each 1 power increase, the affected creature rolls an additional damage die to the damage roll of the first attack that creature uses on each of their turns. This made things a little bit more simpler, and the same goes for the toughness. For each 1 toughness increase, the affected creature rolls that number of hit dice, and the HP maximum is increased by the total rolled, or is decreased by the total rolled. This definitely is reflected in the abilities such as, I think it was the Wraith, where a hit point maximum could be decreased, but it would go away when the creature affected by this hit point maximum decrease took a long rest. Next is the +1/+1 and -1/-1 counters. This was in dire need of being its own separate thing, and I think I finally came up with a system that is more than satisfactory. At least I think. It took me forever to try to come up with this, and my first thoughts I did put on the community page, but I wasn't satisfied after I posted those findings, so I decided to change it a little bit. So, for a +1/+1 counter, for your offensive CR, it is going to increase the power by 1. That creature is going to gain +1 to their attack and damage modifier, as well as 1 additional damage dice to one of their attacks. This includes a spell attack. To their defensive CR, for each +1 to the toughness, the creature gains a +1 to their AC and to their saving throws. Additionally, they get 1 additional hit dice. They roll each additional hit dice gained this way, increasing their hit point maximum and hit point total by the number rolled. I also had another stat change here. Any abilities that the creature has that have a save DC will also get a +1 for each counter gained to a maximum DC of 25. I thought that was appropriate, since we do have some save DCs that are easy to do and could get even easier when a creature is weakened, as we are going to be seeing with the -1/-1 counter. And I put in another note here. -1/-1 counters are to be treated as a curse. However, the remove curse spell will only remove 1 counter per casting. I think this is appropriate because we don't have anything currently that can remove a -1/-1 counter. So treating it as a curse, but limiting how remove curse works on it, could make the spell useful without it being overpowered. Much like with the +1/+1 counters, the -1/-1 counter are going to affect each of the CRs in a similar manner. For each -1 to the creature's power, that creature receives a -1 to attack and damage rolls. Additionally, they roll 1 fewer damage die for their attack's damage roll. Next is your defensive CR. For each -1 to the creature's toughness, that creature gains a -1 to their AC, a minimum of 10, and to their saving throws. They roll 1 of their hit dice. After the hit dice is rolled, the creature's hit point maximum is decreased by that amount, and the hit dice rolled is removed from the total hit dice. For example, a creature with 12d8 hit dice with 5 -1/-1 counters will have their hit point maximum reduced by 5d8 before the total hit dice becomes 7d8. The creature's hit point maximum is reduced to 0 in this way, it will die. Other stat changes that I have added is any abilities the creature has that have a save DC will decrease by 1 for each -1 counter. I thought that was appropriate, so there we go. What are your thoughts on the +1/+1 counters and -1/-1 counter? Does it get that feel of the counters within the card game? Let me know in the comment section. But for now, let's go ahead and continue on to the next point that I changed. And that is Hexproof and Shroud. After looking over what I had did in that original video, I did not find it satisfying to stick with what I had calculated for those two abilities. So I ended up changing them to the following. For Hexproof, this creature is unaffected by the spells or other magical effects of creatures hostile to it. This creature also has advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws. This actually embodies the ability of Hexproof. But then we get on to Shroud. With Shroud, we actually have a more broad scope of what cannot affect it. And that is where this ability will come in. This creature is unaffected by spells and other magical effects that are not its own. This creature also has advantage on all saving throws. Since Shroud is a more powerful version of Hexproof, it made sense to increase the capabilities that Shroud had and make it more protective than Hexproof. This means that the only way to stop a creature with Shroud is with physical attacks, or in this case with physical weaponry. Magic is not exactly going to be helpful, and anything that would induce a saving throw, it will have advantage on. Almost like the limited magic immunity feature, but to a more powerful extent. I think this actually embodies these two abilities rather well. Next is the cannot be blocked abilities, and this desperately needed a change. And when I was looking at some of these abilities, I was reminded of the ability of Flyby, where the creature doesn't provoke opportunity attacks when it moves out of an enemy's reach. So I thought I would put that onto each of these abilities, but also put in that it will not provoke opportunity attacks when it flies into or out of an enemy's reach. But to keep within the theme of the ability, if a creature has a certain ability, like for example, a flying creature interacts with another flying creature, the opposing flying creature can use its opportunity attacks as it normally would. This works rather well with these abilities. The only exception here is, of course, Landwalk. It just doesn't at all provoke the opportunity attacks, since there wasn't really a clause in those abilities that said otherwise, just so long as it was in its normal terrain, like mountain walk abilities being in the mountains, or island walkers being in the middle of the ocean. So long as they are in their terrain, they have this ability to not provoke opportunity attacks when they move in or out of an enemy's reach. And I thought that was really interesting to use. Next is the ability Skulk. This one took me a while because I couldn't figure out how this would work, as we had a lot of different creatures with the ability Skulk. At first I was going to be like, okay, so these mice or rats have Skulk, so that means anything bigger than them. Well, no, because we also have medium-sized creatures, as there was a human who also had Skulk. So that would mean that anyone of a certain size category wouldn't work. So instead, for Skulk, I did only for a CR. I think that made perfect sense. If a creature with a higher CR is on the field, the individual with Skulk does not provoke opportunity attacks against the CR that's higher than it, which I thought was rather fitting. Which one of these abilities do you think you'll be using on your character? Personally, I kind of like the Intimidate and Menace abilities myself, but I think the best one here is going to have to be Skulk. It will definitely work for improving upon those lower CR encounters that a player might have. Next is the Token Summoner, and for this example I have the Skurzdag High Priest summoning a 5/5 demon. Going back to our table from earlier, the Skurzdag High Priest has a spell level of 1 through 7. So if there is a spell of level 1 through 7 that can summon this 5/5 demon token, then we will incorporate that into the High Priest stat block. The 5/5 token I have calculated to be roughly a CR of 5 after everything was said and done. So, if we take a look at the spells that are available, we do have the Summon Greater Demon, which can summon a CR 5 or lower creature. We are able to summon this token with the constraints that the High Priest would have. And I think that works brilliantly. And with that being said, that is all for today's video. If you would like some more homebrew systems, I do recommend some of these videos on screen, such as my system for alcohol in 5th edition. If you want a more recent video, I actually took a crack at making homebrew subclass options. Honestly, I was rather proud of that one. But if you're looking for more, we also have the video that started this whole series off, and that was a raw guide to Homebrewery Part 2. How to create a new monster. With that being said, this has been Drahjan, and I am offline.